Hello, everybody. Welcome to Paranormal Into the Night radio show with me, your host, Dino Ewald. I am also the host of the Late Late Horror Show on YouTube, so go check that out too. You can find both of the Late Late Horror Show and Paranormal Into the Night both on YouTube. And you can also find us in the iTunes store. Search Paranormal Into the Night. You will find that in iTunes, Google Play Store. On Spreaker, give us a follow. It's that little button over to the right there. You just click it and follow us. But I'd say subscribe to us on iTunes, and you will get every show that comes up, and you will never miss us. So there you go. And also www.pitnradionetwork.com. That's the website, and you will find all the shows there, everything else, the blog. You name it, it's there. Got some other cool links there that you guys could check out. What else could I tell you? Facebook, Paranormal Into the Night. Check it out. We're almost up to 5,000 on there. And we're always growing. New. Paranormal Into the Night is new. About a year and a half ago, we started the show, or the Facebook page, and it's evolved into a radio show, which is pretty darn cool. And so we're reaching a pretty good crowd right now. So I'm very, very happy. And I am here. There's been a lot of restructuring with the network and all that and how I'm doing this. So right now it's just Paranormal Tonight radio show. And it's me. I'm going to have fun. I got a lot of interesting guests still lined up for the whole month here and into December. So, and I'm very excited to talk to our guest tonight because I love this topic for sure. Monsters. We got Linda Godfrey, and she's got a book out right now, and she's got another new one that's I think is coming out tomorrow, and I'll talk to her and ask her about that. But the one we're gonna be probably mostly talking about, although I'm gonna be jumping all over the place, there's also some true crime that she did at the long time ago. I want to talk about. Because I'm very interested in that. Her book is Monsters Among Us, an exploration of otherworldly Bigfoots, Wolfmen, portals, phantoms, and phenomena. So I am going to just go right into this and introduce her because there is a ton of stuff to talk about. Linda Godfrey, are you there? You might have to unmute there. I told you to mute.
I was just going to do that. Yes, I'm here. Thank you.
Cute. Cool. So Linda Godfrey, how are you doing?
I'm great, thanks. Very nice night to be on the radio.
Yes, very much so. I appreciate it. I appreciate you taking the time out to talk to me tonight because I love this topic. And boy, there's many, many different ways of looking at it too, and we'll talk about that. So, Monsters Among Us. Tell me a little bit about that book.
Well, this was a book that I decided to write after I started noting that the reports that I receive regularly, and I've been getting them for 25 years. And
Wow.
I still usually hear from somebody or another at least once a week, sometimes more than that. So that's a lot of reports over the years. And it seems like the past several years, there have been more and more where it's not just the creature, although seeing something that looks like a giant wolf standing on its hind legs and kind of staring you down in an insolent way is an uncanny and creepy thing. It seemed like they were coming with associations to UFOs, strange lights, other colors glowing in their fur, different things like that. And this was also true with Bigfoot and some other things. I've started getting reports of people who actually saw transformations, which was something I've always been pretty dubious about. The actual existence of those things.
You mean shifting?
Like a shapeshifter, or even a little different than that in some cases. And I thought that as long as I was getting these, I try to reflect what people are reporting to me. Instead of sometimes people write a book, and this is just another way of looking at it. They have a point, and they gather things that kind of will prove that point. And I guess I do that too in a way, but I mainly am trying to reflect what people are seeing, and what they're interested in, and especially what people are reporting to me. And since I was getting these, I thought, well, just because some of these may seem a little hard to swallow for some people, doesn't mean they didn't happen. The witnesses still seem as good as any others. They check out. And if I don't go and investigate these things too, I'm not really investigating. I'm just sort of, playing to my own tune and putting out what I think should be there. So I was originally going to call this book The Stranger Side of Strange Creatures. But, of course, if you have a publisher, they normally have the right to title your book. And I think they were right. They chose a good title, and it's worked well for that. But that was kind of the impetus, just to show that there were, at various times, reports of anomalies that accompany these cryptids, and some kind of I tried to make some kind of an attempt to see what those associations were, and if they ran true throughout the cryptids, or if they were just all one-offs, or what was really happening.
Okay. Is this your first book that you've done, or no?
This is my 17th published book.
Oh my God. Okay, so yeah, I'm way off. Okay. I mean,
yeah, and this is my newest. This just came out in October.
Okay, yeah, so, October 11th. This came out, right? Yeah.
Right. So this was my newest book, and my last one was 2 years ago, and that one was called American Monsters, and that was an overview of all the different types of monsters, both those that I've received reports on and others that I categorized as land, sea, and air, and told some stories that I think people hadn't heard in a lot of cases, so that was fun too.
Cool, very good. And you know what? I'd like to get into, I mean, it does say, and you got plenty of monster stories, I'm sure, to talk about. And I'll get into some of my favorites, which I really enjoy. But otherworldly, that right there tends to tell me you have kind of a different approach to this.
Well, in this case, I do.
Okay. What do you mean exactly by otherworldly?
Well, there are different terms when we want to, convey the idea that something is not an ordinary event that we expect according to our own laws of physics and our knowledge of the earth as we understand it. Then our minds tend to go, and I'm not sure if it really is somewhere else, but there are different terms. To describe these creatures, some of my First Nation friends might say that they're spirit animals or from the spirit world, and they go back and forth. Someone with a vein more toward modern science might say they're interdimensional, or they come from a vortex or through a wormhole or something like that too. Mm-hmm. There's a religious view that would talk about them being in realms, such as heaven and hell, which are, sound like very, very real, but just somewhere we don't understand worlds. So, there are different ideas about this. And to me, otherworldly just helps imply that it's not business as usual here on planet Earth. It's something that is either beyond our present scientific knowledge, or maybe it is, someplace else, really, that and we're communicating with something that is able to leave that place and pay us a visit.
Okay, because I would think that otherworldly hits it right on the mark, because monsters. I mean, let's be honest. We get all the witness reports and all this other stuff, but we really have never really captured any of these creatures, or it's very hard to get true evidence other than eyewitness reports. And of course there's hair samples, stuff like that, and usually those get discarded and said, we don't know what this is, gets shelved away. But otherworldly could mean interdimensional, coming from the other side. So I mean, who knows? That's do you take that kind of a belief with it?
Well, I try to remain speculative,
Okay.
And open-minded. So, I don't feel that there's probably anybody who knows for sure.
Right.
And I certainly don't have any way to know that. It's just that there's so many things about them, that they almost all have in common, whether it's the upright dogmen or the Bigfoot or the UFOs. And a lot of it is that they all seem, in many cases, most cases probably, when they're encountered by people, to be solid things,
Mm-hmm.
That leave footprints, that appear to be eating other animals sometimes, that can interact. They can scrape cars. They can, perform all kinds of earthly tasks. But then there's this other smaller percentage where people see them actually doing things like vanishing or metamorphosing, or just odd things, sending mental messages, doing things that you wouldn't expect from any normal earthly animal. So, I just like to leave that gate a little bit open. I mean, just the fact, really, people say, well, aren't you afraid people will think you're crazy if you consider those things? And I mean, I'm already considering that there are been many hundreds of sightings of something that people describe as looking like a werewolf, though I don't believe they're actual traditional Hollywood or medieval style werewolves.
Right.
That's enough or if you just say you believe Bigfoot exists, that's enough for most people to say you've gone around the bend right there. So, it's not such a big leap to say, well, if they are here, they certainly don't look and act like our normal animals in any way. They're elusive far beyond the most elusiveness of the creatures we know about, like mountain lions or whatever. We can get great photos of mountain lions.
Mm-hmm.
We cannot seem to get great photos of any of these creatures. It's like there's they would call it in the old Star Trek, not even such the old ones, but Star Trek. I think they would use the word phase shift when everything was just, say, a slightly different vibrational tuning, like they tuned one notch up on the tuning fork.
Right.
And
I love that phrase. I love it.
Pardon?
Oh no, I was just going to say I love the way you phrase that. The classic Star Trek of phasing in. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, I mean, Star Trek was really ahead of its time. So many of the things that
yes.
we sit there and go, "Whoa!" They now have. It's
crazy.
Yeah, the ability to hold the whole encyclopedias on, tiny chips.
Mm-hmm.
Seem just fantastical, but we've probably almost surpassed them in many ways. So, but it's something where that something's there, that it's in its own reality, and that you can perceive it partly, but not all of the way. So my own personal idea lately, in my own efforts to understand it, this is not a scientific theory, it's just my own thought, is that perhaps all of these things exist not just as either completely flesh and blood or either completely just spirit, but that some things are able to be there on a sliding scale, where they can sort of slide from, it's as if you were able to take a little marker and scoop it right on up the chart. You could dial it up. They can dial it up or dial it down. And this is actually pretty similar to what some, again, of my First Nation friends that I've interviewed have told me about their traditions of these things, which is that they are primarily what we would think of as a spirit animal or creature or entity, but that they are able to go between the worlds, and that they can be, when they're here, they're solidly flesh. They can eat, they can sleep, they can, make footprints, procreate, all these things, but they can also get back to their normal habitat or their normal place in the universe. And when they're here, perhaps they do retain some of that slightly out of sync Maybe electromagnetic. Maybe their electromagnetic field is what's out of sync. I don't really know. It's just a guess, because living things do always seem to have electromagnetic fields. We have those. They're weak, compared to, like, say, the planets, but they are there. So
all life is electrical.
Maybe it's just that the tuning of the electromagnetic field that sets it a little bit off, and therefore the instruments we designed to take photos don't really capture them accurately. Maybe it makes them ultra sensitive to things like motion sensor cameras and electronic devices. So where we think we're being stealthy, they're going, oh, there's a big, flashlight. Probably. And again, just speculation.
Mm-hmm.
I've thought about these things and pondered them for 25 years. and honestly, this is the idea that sort of covers everything the best. But there's absolutely no way for us to know that at this point in time that I know of. And, I'm certainly not privy to the latest in scientific development. There's a lot going on with quantum physics and quantum computers and quantum biologics, where they're, experiment. You've probably heard the term, that the human brain is a type of quantum computer.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm. that people will say. And I think there are people who are going with that literally, and using implants, all sorts of things that we probably won't hear about for a very long time.
Oh, yeah. I think we're on the cusp of learning a lot more about the brain and the vibrations of the earth and interdimensional, all that quantum physics stuff, which is very, very deep.
It is.
Just let's try to listen to
much more so than I could explain.
Exactly. I mean, trying to listen to Michio Kaku talk is sometimes makes my head bust, but hey,
he's wonderful. He's one of the best, really, for explaining it.
Yeah, but it's like everything is just so unknown. I mean, we've been here really such a short period of time, and like you said, vibrational, phasing in and out, whatever. I mean, you've been doing this for 25 years, and you probably really don't, you might know more knowledge-wise, but I don't think you really still have any idea really what's going on. I mean...
Of course not. I don't think a lot of people believe certain things, mm-hmm. or they'll think they know or some things, and maybe they do. I'm sure they do.
Right.
I'm sure there are people who know more than I do. But I don't pose myself, although publicists for publishing houses will sometimes use this word, I don't pose myself as an expert. I pose myself as a longtime, serious student of these things. And I've been actively investigating and interviewing lots of people and taking report encounters. And so maybe I've accumulated a little bit more knowledge about it. But I still always see myself as the serious student rather than the one who has, say, arrived and now knows it. I don't ever claim to know it all by any means. Right. And just when I think, maybe I've learned a bunch of things, something will come along that's brand new or completely reverses what I think I know, and I realize I'm just left with more questions than ever.
Oh, yeah. I mean, heck, we just talked and went over quite a few. I mean, we talked about shape shifting, maybe heaven or hell. I mean, who knows what kind of, if these monsters could be, spirits, transforming some way, some form. You say otherworldly. Do you sway either way, whether it's these monsters are actually on this planet interdimensionally in a different vibrational state, or are they actually coming here from a different universe, through these portals? Or we don't know. I mean,
Yeah, I just have to say, when it comes to something like that, I personally have no way of guessing that. It's not like one has ever come up and talked to me and told me about his trip and, its home planet or anything. And I don't know if anyone else.
Well, I asked because I know
really happened.
I know that there's other people who have like Bob Bigelow, who's did all his research at the Skinwalker Ranch, and
Mm.
I mean they say they've got on video. We've never really seen it because he's a billionaire and he keeps all that to himself. But they had a Bigfoot coming out of a portal. So I mean, what does that mean? Does that mean he's coming from a different vibrational state on this planet, or is he coming from somewhere way far away? Portals would tell me you're coming from out of this universe, somewhere different. But that's just one kind of form of evidence that I've gotten. But then you get the other evidence, like we can go with Bigfoot, where they just vanish into thin air. Footprints will just go off somewhere and then they'll stop, and it's just like they've just vanished. So what is that all about? It's just very, very complicated.
Yeah, it is, and I think I made the point in the book, too, that even though, our top best scientists now say that the formulas and the equations that they've developed that show and try to explain quantum physics now really say that there must be other dimensions. I think the minimum is like 11 other dimensions. But they could be an infinite number of dimensions, and that they could intersect. And in fact, it's been shown that they probably do intersect with our world at some times and perhaps can interchange with it, although that's only on the subatomic level that we know of so far. But if it's possible on the subatomic level, perhaps it's also possible on the macro level. Mm-hmm. But that still doesn't tell us what those places are. If anybody ever used to watch, the Buffy and Angel shows, yes, there were always other dimensions coming up in portals, and they would just go jumping into those things and roll around and stand up, and they'd be in a world where they could breathe and they could run around and they could have the same mass and gravity, and everything was, just pretty much the same, except everybody there was really, really weird and probably green skinned and, just very, very different. We don't know if these other places would be anything that we could survive for an instant in, if we could even get in them, if our material bodies would allow us to enter them. We don't know. We don't know what conditions would be or where they are or whether we could ever come back. Maybe there are people who've tried it and do know, but unfortunately have totally lost contact with us. That's possible too. And you find hints of these things. And if you go back in the old fairy tales, many of the fairy tales that you find, in old Great Britain and Ireland and Europe talk about the fairy people. If you accidentally wandered into their world, you would go in there for a very long time. If you ate the food, you were probably doomed to have to stay in there. And if you did get to leave, usually you would find that a great deal of time might have passed since you were there. There's the old tale of Rumpelstiltskin, who fell asleep in the wrong place and woke up, and it was many, hundreds of years later. I think it varies according to the tale. But, it shows that, perhaps time and space operates differently in these places. But, I mean, those kinds of tales have been around for hundreds and hundreds of years. It's not just since we've, our technology has increased so that we can know that there is such a thing as a possible other world, perhaps infinitesimal worlds stacked upon one another like stacks of bubbles, is another way people put it, the bubbleverse or the bubble universe. Lots of different ideas about it. And yet it doesn't tell us any more about these creatures.
Exactly. Like you said, these stories have been around forever. I mean, that's why we have folklore and like you said, fairy tales and stuff like that. And it's been passed down. So, I mean, there's got to be some kind of, truth behind it. And, to a point, I mean, somebody along the way could have made something up. But, there's just too much evidence, with these folklores and stuff like that. And like you said, to this day, people are still seeing things, and there is really a lot of good evidence behind a lot of this stuff. Like, even though we can't capture, like, let's start out with the Bigfoot. I mean, it's, even though we have not captured one, it's probably up there as one of the most widely known, widespread of the cryptids, and from North to South Pole. I mean, you're going to find a type of Bigfoot everywhere. And I know a lady, Edie Kaito. She does Bigfoot gifting, and she's actually has a family of a Bigfoot family in the Indiana area that she's been getting to know, and it's the same family of Bigfoot for the past year and a half. But yeah, very, very interesting. But yet they haven't actually shown their faces to her. And I mean, it's just very interesting, because I mean they're everywhere on the planet, right? I mean, there's the Yeti, the skunk ape, you name it, they're somewhere on the globe, and yet we. But I go back to thinking, and I don't know what you think about this, that the evidence is out there: bones, skulls, hair, stuff like that, probably locked behind closed doors.
Yeah, it is true that I've heard people say when they've had something that seemed like it might be definitive, if they contacted any authorities, it would be gone.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is probably true in many cases. I'm sure there are people who probably have found things and kept them, although usually it's more like the footprints, the trackways, sometimes a little hunk of hair. The trouble with hair samples with Bigfoot is that unless you can get a really good sample and do a thorough DNA analysis, which I think has been done, but it's controversial because
comes back unknown ape, something like that.
Yeah, certain protocols weren't followed, I guess, in the procedure, technicalities. But yeah, it comes back, with human and with unknown primate. The trouble is, when it just says something like unknown primate, there is no unknown primate already on the books to compare it to. In other words, let's say that you got something from a squirrel carcass, and you weren't sure if it was, maybe all the hair is gone, and you weren't sure if it was a red squirrel or a gray squirrel, and you could do the DNA, and you could compare whatever there was to a red squirrel and a gray squirrel that we already had on the books, and say, oh yeah, it matches this one. Well, if you find a Bigfoot and you go to match its DNA structure with the known sample, there is no known sample. So you're just left with unknown primate. And
right.
that to many people is pretty cool in itself, but in our present scientific structure that we have of researchers, it's not quite enough to really determine that it's a completely different thing, or creature, or
right.
person, whatever you like.
Well, in that case, what do you think about the point that it being human and unknown primate, the two being mishmashed there together, DNA-wise, what do you think of the whole alien UFO type thing where, they're, abducting humans, putting the DNA together, and this is kind of their creature, and they come and go between the aliens, and that's why kind of we don't get to see them. Perhaps something made by the aliens themselves, put together, you know what I mean?
Well, it's an interesting conjecture, but it really is conjecture, because even though a lot of people, tend to think there's something to the alien appearances, that there's something, we really still don't know what they are, and people are widely disagreeing on whether they are something from the outer space, quote unquote, or another universe, or something from our own interior Earth, or a time traveler from our own time that's coming back from the future,
Mm-hmm.
or something that is, say, part of an Earth spirit matrix that can form itself into all of these different types of UFOs that are seen. Some look like light spheres, some look like nuts and bolts machines, some look like completely different other things, giant triangles, and the same with all the creatures that come out of them. They still very wide, from reptilians to the little gray things to, you've got tall, blonde-looking beings,
The
and
Nordics,
all
yeah.
ones that look like praying mantises. There are all these different types that sort of mimic Earth creatures that are already here in many cases, as if it were something that is making a copy, but the copies are never quite exactly like we'd expect them to be. Something's always just a little off. But it's also the old idea of the trickster. There is some sort of being that, and maybe it's not something as just diffuse as a spirit matrix, but maybe it's actual separate entities that have the ability to interact with the human mind and spirit, and either use that to project themselves as something, or just to mimic whatever image the human is familiar with. So, there are just so many different ideas and possibilities. There are some that I gravitate toward a little bit more than others, but I never would say this is it, this is right, and whatever you think is wrong, because I just feel too humble to know that sort of thing. And if I did know the answer, I'm sure I wouldn't be nearly as interested in pursuing the subject, because it'd be all over, right?
Well, of course, yeah. I mean, but aren't you just a little amazed that we just can't figure it out? I mean, I know that's probably because the world in itself is just so mind-boggling, and I mean, if people of faith, got different views, but I'm kind of the type of person who's looking for answers and looking for the beginning, and how all this was created, and what created the very first creator, God, whatever you want to call it. I mean, I'm just so amazed by what's going on out there. I mean, the everyday person will be walking around, going shopping, coming home from work, just doing their daily things, their daily rituals, and not even give this stuff a second thought. But the people who are diving deep into it, and it is pretty popular. You see all the shows out there. It's just amazing that we still aren't any closer to any of this. And even 25 years later, with you still studying this, that you're still going strong, you're still involved, and you're still wanting to know. It's just, I'm just amazed that we haven't come up with anything yet,
Well, nothing that can be proven.
Right.
I mean, I come at it from a Christian viewpoint. I was raised Lutheran, small town Wisconsin Lutheran, and I was just always fascinated by the amazing things that were in the Bible, and I would ask my minister about them, and he wasn't really equipped to tell me, whether there were aliens. I remember asking that in confirmation class. And in fact, I think I told this in my first book on these topics, The Beast of Bray Road. I asked him if there were, and he said, well, no. I said, well, how do we know? And he said, well, because, the Bible would have told us about them. And it occurred to me, I don't remember if I actually said it directly right back to him, but I know I did it at some point, because I discovered, unless you count things like lions, the Bible doesn't mention cats, like house cats.
Right.
It doesn't. It has lots of things about dogs and lions and other type of animals, but there are no house cats mentioned.
Really?
And yet we know that there are house cats.
Really? There is no mention of cats in the Bible?
Not that I know of.
Okay.
And yet, the Egyptians at the during biblical times were mummifying cats.
Right.
They certainly had them around, and it's not that they were unknown, but And somebody's probably going to come and prove me wrong about that. I just remember that and I don't mean, I'm certain that at the age of 14, I was not a biblical scholar of any sort to know that. But just as far as I was concerned, I couldn't find them. And that was my answer, I know that there are other things that just for some reason, not every single species of animal is mentioned by name in the Bible, and yet there are other species, which would be probably a better way to put it.
Are there monsters that you have tackled in any of your books mentioned in the Bible?
Well, yeah, I think you could say so. Not maybe in exactly the same way, but, I've seen a few articles. Daniel J. Wood actually wrote an article about monsters in the Bible that was in Fate magazine. And sometimes you have to maybe read a little bit in. For instance, King Nebuchadnezzar, who was punished by God by turning him into something that at least acted like a beast in the field. He went out and acted as if he were an animal, and his hair grew very long and gnarly, and he ate grass, grazed along with the other animals. We don't know for sure that that's a monster exactly, but the Bible does talk about Leviathan, the monster of the deep. Many of these things that they're not angels exactly, like the cherubim, for example, that accompany, that seem to be part machine and part terrifying creatures with four faces and all these wheels spinning in and out, with Ezekiel's chariot, that sort of thing, with Ezekiel's wheels. You can go through and find things like that.
What is that called again?
I'm thinking Ezekiel.
Okay.
If you look that up, you'll find the description. I was just looking at it again the other day, and it's when you really stop and look at each part of it. And some people have drawn these things up and shown them to look like some sort of cybernetic machine creature. You never know if it's just their imagination or how close they're hitting to the mark, but the description itself is quite awe-inspiring.
Sounds like it.
Yeah. So there are things. It doesn't talk about werewolves, but it talks about wild dogs, and it doesn't talk about monsters in the term of those very familiar monsters that we know about. Now, some people think that there are parts of the Old Testament in the first few chapters that allude to either Bigfoot, original Bigfoot, or something whose offspring was Bigfoot, the Nephilim, the old renowned of old, giants, those sorts of things. Yeah. You can find a lot of that just in the first few chapters. So there's a lot to go on, and I think a lot of scholarly work that could be done in that area.
Getting back to that part machine, the Ezekiel, what was mentioned in the Bible when it talked of that?
I'm
very interested in that now.
In front of me, and I don't want to misspeak anything about the Bible. So, but it's the wheel. It's described as wheels turning within wheels, and the faces of the cherubim are metallic, and it's just this kind of amazing sight. And the question is always, some people say, well, perhaps this is just a highly technological object, and the people of that day are describing it in the only terms that they're able to, in terms of known metals, using the shiny like bronze, polished bronze, and and of creatures combined, but that actually it's a created or a designed intelligent. Excuse me, I'm not saying an intelligently designed vehicle of some sort. That's one idea. Okay. That's really my idea exactly. Because they're supposed to be living things also. So it's it's something that's always puzzled people, and it's something that you don't see, on this earth by any means, on any normal day, that is, not anywhere where I've seen it. But it's just, and it's not that I think you should read the Bible just to find monsters in it. I read the Bible for a lot of different reasons.
Exactly.
But you will, as you go through, find these references to things that do seem otherworldly. They would seem monstrous to anybody looking at them, just especially seeing it or encountering it for the first time. And there is absolutely a spirit world described, something beyond our own world. And those are the important things about that particular subject, as far as I'm concerned, in the Bible.
Yeah, wow. So I'm definitely going to have to look that up, because that's very intriguing. What a story. Boy, and I'd love to get to the fairy stuff. I'd like to know what you think of gnomes, but let's get back to, I think I would like to talk about werewolves right now. What do you think of werewolves? Do you think the dogman and the werewolf through folklore are the same thing? Are they two separate creatures? What do you think of the werewolf?
Well, when you use the word werewolf, and I have to add that oftentimes that gets tagged to my work. The publishers like it in the titles because it gives a handy mental image right away. And it really just means that these are canine creatures that are walking on their hind legs by humans. But if you go back in time, werewolf had a very different meaning once. It was back in the Middle Ages, medieval times. It was commonly believed that there were werewolves, that people could and did turn into them all the time. And by these, I mean the actual transforming type of thing, where they would often by means of some magical act or a magical ointment be able to bodily change themselves into this ravenous beast that would then go out and actually kill and eat not just livestock but people. There was the Beast of Gévaudan was one of the best known. It was supposed to have killed well over 100 people, and was supposed to be some type of werewolf. There was also the idea that you could take a wolf skin and tie it around your waist, and then you could go into a sort of a trance, and the werewolf creature would go out from you while you remain sleeping. But if it sustained any kind of a wound, say somebody shot it with an arrow in its arm, then you would also be found with that same sort of wound in your arm. So these are all traditional beliefs that don't really apply. Neither do the Hollywood added beliefs, such as that, if you get bitten by one, then you'll turn into one, or on the full moon, that's when they come out. They can be killed by silver bullets. Many of these things were added by Hollywood movies, too. So you have all of this lore that puts together this kind of truly mythical creature, where it's a bunch of myths and folklore coming together. And yet today, there are lots and lots of people that are seeing things that look like these animals, but they don't act the same way. To my knowledge, I've never had anybody who was physically attacked, except for one gentleman years ago in Quebec who was grazed on his hip and flanked by the fang of one as it was trying to actually brush by him and escape. Most of the time, they seem to enjoy confronting people, scaring people, chasing people, but then they always end it before anything really happens. And that's not how the werewolves of history have acted. It's a much different thing. And you can go back to books by authors like Montague Summers, who wrote about the werewolf extensively. And especially the old European traditions of them. There were even good werewolves. In Germany, there was supposed to be this special troop of werewolves that every year at harvest time would change into their werewolf form and then make a trip down into hell and they sort of fight the devil for both souls and for the good crops that they expected to have. And then they'd come back and they'd sort of be the town heroes for performing this good deed to save the harvest every year.
Really?
And that's just one of the many different traditions that there are. But again,
did they know who that person was in that type of tradition?
It was, and again, I don't have the book in front of me, so I don't remember the exact name, but there was a particular town where there was more than one person. It was kind of like a pack of them that would go and perform this service.
Huh. So definitely shapeshifters, the werewolf, throughout history, you do believe?
Well, yeah, there are different ways that people look at shapeshifting. Every one of these arms of information, if you will, that you can start getting into, you'll find you say, okay, they're shapeshifters, but there are lots of different kinds of shapeshifters. And then among this type of shapeshifter, it keeps branching out and branching out, so that if you try to write it all down, it gets kind of complicated, and they still don't really sound like what people are seeing today. That's what I keep coming back to. You can go find tons of very old, ancient legends about things that people are calling werewolves, and it's kind of the same thing with, to a lesser degree, with the Bigfoot, but especially with the werewolves. Tons of legends, but most of them just don't apply to what people see today. It's almost as if we're making our own legends. We have our own type of contemporary creatures that we see and that behave in certain ways that are fairly consistent with one another, but not really consistent with the very old times. There were also supposed to be great areas in many countries where there were what were called the cynocephalic dogs, cynocephalese, where that just means dog head, where people who were obviously human had the heads of dogs. And
right, the hairy, long.
Yeah, and these tales were told by supposedly Christopher Columbus and Marco Polo, and are not regarded by all historians as exact facts. Sometimes, there might have been confusion, or who knows, they were a while ago, and these are even harder to confirm than our contemporary things that we have today. So it's really a very wide topic, when you go into all of the history, all the different types, the ones that think they can. And I haven't even touched on, say, in Tibet, where they, if they study for many years, there is a sort of thought form creature called a tulpa that people can learn to create by focusing their own energies and drawing on their own energetic or spirit body to produce this form, or just, you could say, to produce a thought form that becomes solid, might be another way of putting it. And some people who've written that they've achieved this have said that occasionally they'll create a form that starts growing its own way and becomes more sinister, and eventually just sort of lops off its connection to the person and goes off and does its own thing. And that's kind of a scary idea.
Yeah, I'd say so. So you believe, so do we all have the ability to, if we worked hard enough at it, to become shapeshifters, or do you think?
I don't know. I think that most of the time, I'm talking about people who would be called adepts in their field of religious study, or it's sort of the same thing that happens with any kind of nature-based religion, with shamans can be trained after many long years to do this sort of thing. But usually in these cultures, there's something special about a person that marks them to be able to do this.
Okay.
It's nothing, and again, I'm not an anthropologist.
Right.
I don't claim to have special knowledge, but I've never gotten the sense that it's something that just anybody could pick up and do. And they usually require not only long years of training, but sometimes hallucinogenic plant substances
Mm-hmm.
are used as an aid. Other times, there are certain magical rites that are used that I absolutely don't get into or go there. It's just, not what I want to learn about or know. Just
Oh, I
just
hear
to know
you.
that people who use magical rites is enough for me. Um,
Yeah.
it's not my calling to write about those any further.
Mm-hmm.
But there are just lots and lots of different beliefs along these lines worldwide. I think it's just interesting that at the basis of them all is this idea that there's some connection, some sort of transition point, some sort of relationship between certain animals and people, and that people, left to their own devices, seem to be they'll sometimes find ways to seek those out and utilize them.
Hmm. You're talking about the past now, and that things are different
Yes.
now. What are people really seeing when we're talking about werewolves in the modern day? I mean, are we talking something totally different than we've heard from in the past? Is that what we're talking about when we talk about dogmen?
Most of the time, yeah. And I think dogman is a pretty good modern term. Dogman, wolfman, I've used the term man-wolf.
Okay.
Just anything to kind of get away from the term werewolf just has so much baggage with it. It just comes with all that silver bullet,
Yeah.
full
Hollywood,
moon
I get it. Yeah, it's what
type of
Hollywood.
thing.
Yeah.
And some people do say that what they see looks kind of like the idea of the muscled animals of Hollywood film, but not usually exactly as they are. And I would say that in about 90% or more of the reports,
Mm-hmm.
the people will describe something that looks totally canine, that stands between 5.5 and 7 feet tall. Usually they'll say it walks on its hind legs, but it's a little hunched over, which makes sense because the canine neck and spine are not aligned in the same way to stand erect that a human's is. So usually they will be a little bit hunched over at the neck. They will describe something with elongated paws with claws. That some will say, well, if there was such a thing as a dog hand, that it would look like this because the paws were a little longer and it still had the claws in them, as opposed to like Bigfoot, which has very human-like hands, definite hands. So they'll describe it often as having a shaggy brown coat, but it might also be gray or black, or a lighter brown, whatever colors you might see in a natural wolf pack. These are the
Okay.
colors people will report.
Hmm.
They'll say that, but very telling are the head and the feet. And in this case, they will normally report that the head looks like either a wolf or a German shepherd with tall, pointy ears on top of its head and a long snout with fangs. If there's eye shine, it's generally described as yellow or perhaps yellow-greenish, maybe even golden in some cases. And then they'll say, this is really the kicker, they'll say it was running really well on its hind legs, but its legs were bent backwards. And by that, they're observing that it's running on its toe pads, which is what canines do. They run on their toe pads,
Mm-hmm.
and would be like our heel and ankle is up off the ground. And
Huh.
you might call that the hock joint. It's what would be our heel and ankle, analogous to that anyway,
Yeah.
is up off the ground. So where we are expecting to see a knee, it's bending back the other way. And then what would be analogous to our knee joint is actually up more where we're expecting to see like a thigh. So it looks like the legs are made backwards, but it's really just that they're going on their toe pads. And that's why when you see the prints, you would see it would be kind of like what if you were walking around on your tiptoes, and what you would see with your 5 toes, and then just that top part of your foot. And that's very different than Bigfoot, which walks flat-footed.
Right.
Bears, the technical word is plantigrade, What dogs do is called walking digitigrade, because their digits, are at the grade or the soil level. And humans, we normally, unless you're a ballerina, if they're wearing toe shoes, there's another word for that I can't think of, but it's one step beyond the digitigrade because they're on the very points of their toes, and that's actually what deer, and the deer hoofs are kind of hardened, solidified, as if you could
toes, yeah,
get the points of your toes to be like that. Yeah, that's what ballerinas are doing when they're in their toe shoes. They are more like the deer.
Deer or ballerina?
Yeah.
Okay.
Ballerina deer. That's kind of cool. That'd make a really nice Disney movie, I think.
Exactly. Yeah. What a comparison. I don't know if you have ever tackled this monster before, but I'm very much into the history of vampires. I don't know if you've ever tackled that subject before, and what your thoughts are on it.
Yeah, I've written about that. I did a book called Mythical Creatures.
Okay.
For Chelsea House Publishers in New York. There was was part of a series that was edited by Rosemary Guiley, and I did one called Werewolves, one called Lake and Sea Monsters, and one called Mythical Creatures. Okay. And I kind of looked into the vampires for that. While in a lot of Eastern European countries, werewolves and vampires are considered kind of two sides of the same coin. They're often considered really the same animal, the same creature. Whereas we, in Western tradition, farther Western tradition, consider them completely separate things. And to me, I don't really put them in the same category as all of these things that look like animals, cryptid animals. They're just,
right.
Unless you're talking about chupacabras, which are supposed to be, vampire-style creatures.
Yeah, I'm talking. But
the human vampires, and things like zombies are maybe sort of in the same category. They don't look like animals, and they don't interest me as much. And I think there's something really different, and I don't know what they are at all. I don't pretend to know that. They seem, in many cases, more related to religious beliefs than the cryptids are. So, I've studied them. I've looked at them, but I don't generally. They're not my selected topics of main study.
Right. I thought I'd ask you because
Sure.
It's just something.
Sure, I have written a bit about both of them, but not whole books or anything like that.
Okay, interesting. And again, we are talking with Linda Godfrey. Her book is Monsters Among Us, an exploration of otherworldly Bigfoots, Wolfmen, portals, phantoms, and odd phenomena. And they can find your books on, I'm sure, Amazon and everywhere else books are sold, right?
Sure. Amazon, Barnes & Noble, brick and mortar Barnes & Noble stores, and other brick and mortar bookstores too.
Right.
And there are other online vendors. You can go to lindagodfrey.com and find a book list on the About page, and some of my recent blogs.
Okay, good. And I will have all the links to all of her stuff and her website and everything will be in the description of wherever the show's at, whether it's Spreaker, iTunes, YouTube. So just check the links down below and follow them, and you'll get to her websites and all the good stuff, her Facebook page, all that.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah, no problem. So, and you know what? What do you, I see phantoms in the title of your book, too. What do you mean by phantoms?
Well, a phantom is something that may look like, say, a person or an animal, but you can tell by its behavior that it's not a solid animal, it's not a solid person, it's perhaps some type of otherworldly or spirit image or entity. I mean, sometimes you won't even know if it is an actual intelligent entity or if it's just an image projected from somewhere or a leftover imprint of something. But that refers mostly to the chapter where I deal with people who have things show up in their bedrooms. If something just pops through the wall into your bedroom and then after whatever happens, it vanishes. That's just not simply a run-of-the-mill or run-of-the-mill timber wolf that has somehow, just popped into your bedroom. It's much different than something you might encounter along the roadside or even hiking. You're in your house, and this thing all of a sudden pops into your bedroom and vanishes. That is what I would call a phantom, because it obviously, at least at that time, is not flesh and blood. It's operating under some other sort of rules of the universe that we don't understand very well.
Okay. And by that, are you talking about a shadow person or just vaguely same category?
People will report seeing, waking up and seeing full-blown, just complete wolf-looking creatures. They look like they're real. They look like they're solid, but they're in the bedroom, and in a locked house, inside a locked house, with no obvious way to have gotten in. One lady reported that there were two of them that reminded her of Anubis, the Egyptian god of the dead, and she said they actually weren't even paying much attention to her. They were looking around the room rather as if they were, tourists touring an old mansion or something, and very interested in all the things that she had around in her room. And then they just vanished. And these are different in just so many ways. They're often, and when they are the canines that appear, they will oftentimes look much more humanoid in their body structure. They'll have actual shoulders, which true canines don't. They will be walking on their hind legs. They will often have, if they have eye shine at all, it may be red rather than the normal yellow or yellowish gold. They'll often strike the witness as being extremely intelligent or very aware, very focused on who they are. It's kind of like they focus curiously upon the person, and that really kind of scares people because that doesn't seem right. It's something that...
No, not at all.
It seems very uncanny. They seem sentient or self-aware, and it's just a different sort of thing. I do also have a chapter on shadow animals, which are, again, very much like the shadow people. They just look solid black. They don't have any depth to them. There was a whole family in one incident that was outside. They had a garden and a little cornfield, and everybody saw this black thing lurking in the nearby tree line, and it came out from the tree line and walked right through the garden and the cornfield, turning once so that they could see it was only about as wide as, they said, it was like if you had a cardboard cutout of a dog, and it looked great from the side, but then you turned it towards you and you could see it was only the width of a piece of cardboard. And they could only see one eye. If it's walking along, not facing you, you will just see one eye until it turns its head straight towards you. But they would just see on each side one eye. And I guess the grandma ran and got a broom and tried to chase it away. But there was quite a large family. I can't remember exactly how many, but a whole bunch of them that saw it at once. And there was another woman in central Wisconsin who saw one of these things. They seem to lurk around where the trees meet the grass, this kind of liminal area between the forest and the human tended lawns or mown meadows. This woman saw it kind of near a railway intersection. So there was kind of a grassy area and then the trees, and then she saw this thing lurking right at the trees, and it was just like the shadow of a large, dark canine.
I've never really heard a story put like that before. That is very interesting. I mean, and you have really no idea what that could possibly be. I mean,
no. There's been one suggestion that sort of makes sense, which is like picture Batman up in the top of his building with the bat signal, and he projects the bat signal out over the city, so that Robin knows it's time to come and get in the bat car. So I've heard several people suggest that maybe these shadow creatures, men and doggies, are projections from another world or universe where they've got their own sort of gadget that they can maybe even just project an image of themselves, just enough so that they can go and walk around in a two-dimensional form and gather information, perceive things. Who knows why they would do it, but that it's a two-dimensional projection from another world. And that, I'm sure, is completely unprovable by science, although I can be, I'm always uneasy talking about science, because just as soon as I state something that I think is a hard fact, I'll find out that it can be easily refuted. But it does, just to me, thinking about it, it seems like we have similar precedents in our own world. So perhaps that's a possibility somewhere else in one of these other multi-universes that our physicists have said may exist.
Okay, so yeah, that's just one way and one possibility of them getting to this side.
To interact somehow.
Using some kind of instrument, projector, something, just a term.
They may not even need an instrument. It might be something that they can do themselves naturally. Maybe that's where they go in their dreams. Maybe, there's a two-dimensional world that comes to the 3D world. Who knows?
Okay.
I'm speculating wildly.
Right.
It's not, it's not, none of these are hard and fast things that I say have to be the way it is. Every time I think I settle upon something, something comes along, and I think I said this earlier, to kind of knock it off its pedestal a little bit, and then there'll always be something else that comes along and says, no, wait, maybe it's this. So we have a lot of things to choose from. And again, this idea of the trickster, the Navajo coyote who can be bad or good, bring evil or goodness to people, or the little people in old Europe that could work all night for you and make you blessed and prosperous, or if you did something else, they could really hurt you. This idea of the tricksters that we really don't understand, but that kind of like to be there to confuse us, is a very old concept, and you find it in almost all world religions in one shape or form.
Right. Wow. Well, yeah, the shadow stuff is that's a different way of me thinking about them now. That's very interesting. I'd like to talk about, you did say the little people over there in Europe, and I love that topic. I love the gnomes, the leprechauns. What do you think of that? Do you think they're really somewhere along down in history? And even today, people report gnomes till this day. And I have been open in past shows that when I was younger, I saw a gnome. I really did.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Me and my uncle, and people can think I'm nuts, but
I would love to hear that story.
Well, I was 14 years old. Okay, me and my uncle, we would always hang out, and we lived it was a kind of a rural area. It was an acre of land, and there were woods in the back, but we didn't see it outside. We saw it inside, and we were just playing like we usually do. We were, I think, seeing who could flip the caps the closest to the wall. Just something very playful, and we would do this quite often. But there was a bathroom to the left side of us that where we could see out of our side of our vision, and we basically were just playing there, and we look over, and this is going to be the part that kind of is weird, because even to me, I'm like, wow, I don't understand this, but it was a gnome. It was about 5-6 inches high. It was very small,
Wow, that's tiny.
Yes, very tiny. But it poked out from the side of the wall and looked at us, and it had the pointy red hat, the green pants, the typical gnome that you would see. And it was a split second that this happened, but we both seen it, and it turned around, it looked at us, we could see the beard, everything on it, and it took off right past, back the other way. And this was in the bathroom, and we went and looked in there, and there was, it couldn't have got out anywhere. There were no holes or behind.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and it was just one of those things that I seen. It happened. I was 14, so I'm old enough to even to this day know that I seen it. But and me and my uncle both seen it. So it's like, what did we see? I don't quite understand. It was odd and probably the weirdest thing that ever happened to me when it comes to seeing something. But yeah, that's what happened.
Wow. Yeah, I have a friend who actually wrote. I co-authored Weird Wisconsin and then I authored Weird Michigan in the Weird U.S. series, and I did a couple of follow-up books. One called Strange Wisconsin, which has a story in it by a friend of mine who saw one of these things very similar to what you described in her grandparents' horse barn when she was a child. Okay. And lots of times it is children who see them, but these diminutive humanoids, again, it's something that's universal and timeless. They've been seen over the ages in every culture. The Native Americans have their own. I know one. There's one nation that calls them Pukwudgie, and there are numerous other names for them. But there just wouldn't be so many consistent sightings and legends and lore about them everywhere if there wasn't some grain of truth behind it, and maybe, why do they wear the red pointed hats? That's something else I've always wondered about. Although I actually have an as yet unpublished novel about gnomes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and you find out why they wear the red hat, the tall cone-shaped red hats, in my novel. It's going to be coming out as an ebook from my agent, and I co-published a few of my books, the fiction, and then we reissued the Beast of Bray Road, a new edition of that, and we may have another one of those coming out too. But yeah, I had a lot of fun with it, and I actually back into history. I have both Czech and German ancestors that came over on the boats, during the great waves of European migration around the 1900s, and I kind of made a made-up relation to my own ancestors, that came over and had them bring these things with them, and and I have a pair of ceramic gnomes on my front porch, by the way. So I do like these things. And by the way, if you don't mind my mentioning it, at my blog, which is just lindagodfrey.com, somebody had just written me and sent me this wonderful story, or actually it was a story, not so much a story as a photograph that somebody she knew had taken on a trail cam a few years ago, that shows this beautiful kind of undulating light form, and then what looks like these winged lights flying all around it. And she thought they might be fairies, and I really like it when people aren't afraid to ask questions and aren't afraid yet to have something examined. And she said, please go ahead and have it examined by someone. And I also put it up on a Facebook page called Unknown Creature Spot, and we had a really good discussion of it. And the consensus, including one true expert who weighed in, the consensus was kind of what I thought in the beginning, that it was caused by a water droplet, probably on the lens of the trail cam, and that all these little wing things were the bottoms of
bugs.
orbs that were formed by the little maybe water droplets or whatever, reflecting the light that was whatever was lighting this picture up. It's a very charming and enchanting looking picture because you're in these dark woods and then there are these beautiful white things that look like they're flying around. But that picture is almost certainly caused by water on a lens. However, it has absolutely nothing to do with the question of whether there are or not fairies. It just means that doesn't happen to be a picture of them.
Right, right. And I like how you just jumped right over the gnomes, though. What a tease you did there with the gnome hat.
Yeah, it's a tease, but it's a ways from coming out yet. So, but if you keep an eye out, when it does get published, I'm hoping to get that done sometime this winter. It'll be at that website too.
Okay, cool. Sounds good. I'll keep a lookout for it for sure because I do want to know, that's for sure. And you know what? Feel free to, when you do get it, to post it in Paranormal Into the Night. I do believe I got you in there. So, and so just really quickly though, because I don't think I got totally your impression on what you think the gnomes are.
I think that they're. I think of them myself
like
as
what did
some
I see?
Sort of nature-related spirit creatures.
Okay.
Not, it's really hard to say because again, it's an unknown quantity. But I see them as a part of the natural world that maybe exteriorizes itself so that they can be seen by us sometimes. And they mimic our form. Maybe they don't have enough energy to be the same size we are, so they come out smaller. Maybe that's why they always look smaller. And the red hat, honestly, I don't actually know why the red hats, but I come up with an explanation. That's in the book. But people do often see them. The hats aren't always red, but they're very often in either peaked hats or they're running around in little capes and hoods, kind of like tiny monks. That's another sort of way that people will often see them.
Right.
Sometimes they're furry. They look like little tiny monkeys. They're different. They appear in different forms, but usually always humanoid and tiny.
Okay. Well, yeah, very. Oh, but I love that. The fairy folk, the little legends of the gnomes and stuff like that. Trolls. I'm a big Hobbit fan, so.
Oh, me too. They're just those are my favorites.
Yeah, the
whole Lord of the Rings trilogy is just
my favorite story of all time. The Lord of the Rings and the Vampire Chronicles are my two favorite stories to read.
Yeah, that I haven't read. I will admit to being completely obsessed by the Walking Dead.
Oh my gosh, so am I. I am obsessed by it. I love it. So let me ask you your opinion on what you thought of the opening, the first show of the season this year. Oh,
I was just sick.
Weren't you? I mean, I was sick and most.
I said to my husband, I don't know if I can watch this anymore, hon. But they showed a few teasers from the next week's show, and you were kind of made to understand that it would be a kinder, gentler show. And I said, well, I just have to see how this shakes out. So, of course, I watched that.
Oh, yeah.
And I often have to TiVo it, but I do try to always catch the episodes. And I've seen most of them more than once. But with that one, I've never been a huge zombie fan necessarily. It's just that this show has such superior writing and acting and characterization. It's just an amazingly good, well-written, well-put-together show.
It's about much more. Yeah, it's about much more than the zombies. It's about the story and the characters and the breakdown of society with these monsters coming. I mean, it's just. But what got me was how Rick was just berated, and it just got to me so deep. I'm not saying that Glenn and getting it wasn't sad, because of course it was, but I saw it coming. I really did. I knew that people would end up dying, but how he berated Rick and that camper just got to me, and I'm like going, oh my God, I was just hating Negan so bad, but oh well.
Yeah, you wonder how people can write and imagine such an evil person. It's really the only word to describe him. He's just really pretty much evil. But and even that again, you could call a zombie a monster, but again, it's something I don't usually include in my own work because it's just different. It's a human sort of thing, and I think the apocalyptic angle to it also draws people in. It's like, what would we do if we didn't have our food and our houses and our electronics and our cars?
Mm-hmm.
We're surviving. Not only humans that had turned into biting, horrible things, but other humans that wanted to victimize us as well. So it's just, but it's good literature. It's very good literature, very very well written.
Oh, for sure. Like we said, well, I said too, one of my favorite shows. But anyways, I love zombies. I love 28 Days Later. I don't know if you ever seen that show either. That movie.
Yeah, I have. That's grisly, very grisly. Yep.
Yeah, very good though. A different take on it, but more of a virus type thing going on there. But,
yeah.
Let me ask you, what is the most amazing monster story that you've ever come across in your 25 years? Anything stand out to you?
Yeah, there really is. There's one in my new book, Monsters Among Us. I don't want to give too much of it away, but the title of it is the Church Lady Monster, because there was a church in Illinois a few years ago that was that had kind of the experience of their lives one Sunday morning when this lady sitting in the front row, and there was the pews were U-shaped, and there was a family of four sitting directly across from her. They had a good view, and the parents have never gotten over this, and they contacted me because they just wanted other people to know that what they had seen could be real and could happen. The lady at the end of the service, as the pastor was walking by, suddenly jumped up, let out this horrible, horrible scream, and turned into what looked like a werewolf. And
really?
They said it wasn't like Hollywood movies where Jack Nicholson is, his whiskers are growing out into fur, and you hear all the bones contorting and crunching, and there's all this sort of stuff going on. Although I have heard of a transformation where there was crunching, but they said it was almost like she was just instantaneously covered by this werewolfishness, except instead of paws, she had hoofs, kind of like goat hoofs or some type of, so that was very very different. And before she could do anything, the elders kind of all slammed onto her at the same time and took her down onto the church pew, out of sight of the rest of the congregation again, and then within a few seconds she had returned to herself.
Okay.
And this is one that I kind of went, what? And because
it's odd. I mean, it has to do with a werewolf kind of creature again, but it's different.
But it's just such a it's just so unbelievable sounding. But I met with this couple several times, interviewed them in person, face to face. Had a lot of good long talks. I investigated and checked out every single thing they said about where the church was. It's no longer there, by the way. So it's not like you can find it and go visit it. It's just not there.
Okay.
Other little things that they told me, I went every single thing they mentioned, checked out completely. And I also asked them to sign affidavits for the publisher saying that, because I just knew it was one of those stories that people are going to go, what? Come on.
How many people were there?
True.
Eyewitnesses? How many eyewitnesses or people were there?
Well, there were like around 200 people in the church, but it happened fairly quickly, and a lot of them saw it, but a lot of them didn't. And the couple said that after the service, people were kind of talking among themselves saying, did you see that? Or did you, yeah, what was that? That kind of thing. But after that, it was not encouraged to talk about it. People just didn't say anything about it.
Really?
It was kind of a taboo topic. And the woman was a fairly new attendee, so the people didn't really know her. And then after, they heard later that she had moved out of town and never followed her, of course, to see where she went or anything like that. So there wasn't any chance to really follow up. But she did come back to church for a little bit and made everybody really, really uneasy. When she was around, I'm quite sure that's understandable.
Right. Wow.
But
being in church,
there was a
too.
little poltergeist activity. Pardon?
I said, being in church too, you would think that there would be some kind of maybe a religious take on there.
Well, I think it's probably as extreme and perfect an example of what a lot of people would call demonic possession as you could find.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was like she was literally possessed by something that looked like a big wolf with hooves.
Wow. Which a lot of people would say would be the devil, Satan himself. That kind of that hoofed feet. There's a story that and I guess I could tell you this because, and I've said it before, but you probably would enjoy the story. My grandparents, they dealt with a lot of paranormal through their whole life. Don't ask me why. It followed them wherever they went. But my grandmother, and she was somebody who was very believable, and I don't see why she would be making this stuff up. But even as a child, she dealt with a lot of different things. And she said her and her sister were in bed one day, and she had to be probably like 8 years old, something like that. But she says to this day, a guy came to her sister's side of the bed, okay, and she said you could see the like hairy goat type like legs to him. And she said he was red. He had 2 horns, like kind of like a devil type would look, and she said he had that really pointed black goatee on there too that he would have. And she said just what struck him was the way he was looking at her sister in bed, and he was leaning down to her. And she closed her eyes, and when she opened them again, he was gone. But, that she got a total perfect image of what you would, think the devil would look like. And
yikes.
Yeah. It's a story she's told over the years many times to us, and said it happened, and that's just one story that happened over the years. My grandparents, well, especially my grandmother, I wouldn't say both of them, but my grandmother especially seemed to have this stuff happen all through her life, even until the day she passed away, which was very odd. And some of it I did witness to when it came to the houses that she moved into that were basically haunted. We would, there would be shadow people that you would see right on the walls. There were poltergeist activity. Things would just float off of the chimney mantle and just drop down. So I don't know if it was something somehow she brung along with her, or if it was just, who knows. But, do you believe that people can bring this stuff and carry it along with them?
I do, yeah. I've just heard too many examples of that sort of thing happening, that there seem to be spirits that can attach themselves to objects and or to people, and that travel with them, or sometimes they'll stay around the same house or around some particular object. John Zaffis, who has the TV shows on haunted things, has a collection. He and I were at a paranormal convention as speakers a couple of years ago, and he had his whole collection of haunted dolls. And that was the creepiest.
Oh yeah, dolls are creepy.
I ever saw in my life. Yeah, and he'll describe how these things, people who buy them will take them home and then they'll hear voices and there'll be poltergeists and that kind of thing. But I do think that there is a spiritual world and there are spiritual entities, and that they can, for whatever reason, attach themselves to things and people.
Okay, yeah, I believe the same thing. I've been trying to get John. It's hard to get a hold of him through his messages to get him on the show with me. But, the question I'm very curious, though, with those dolls and stuff, like all these haunted objects he takes with him to the museum. I mean, wouldn't that stuff carry over to him and his museum? Wouldn't he be... Or maybe he does. Maybe he deals with a lot of this paranormal activity, in the museum itself and stuff.
It could be, yeah. You'd think that it would. I think it's a place I wouldn't want to sleep in overnight.
Nah, I wouldn't think so. Not with that many, especially if they attach themselves to the items. I mean, can you imagine the storm of paranormal activity going on in that place? If you did, but.
No.
Oh my gosh. Well, you know what? We got still got a half hour here, and I did want to touch on, if you don't care, you have actually talked about. I think you did have a book on true crime at one time. Something about Matheson, or.
No, that's the name of the Matheson Memorial Library. Is Elkhorn, Wisconsin's library. That's the name of it.
Okay, yeah, that's right. I'm sorry, I got that wrong.
They've hosted me. I was part of a true crime panel there that they had this fall with 2 other true crime writers, and honestly, that was my first book. Before The Beast of Bray Road, I wrote this book called The Poison Widow: A True Story of Sin, Strychnine, and Murder. And it's about this case that occurred in Wisconsin in the 1920s.
Mm-hmm.
And it was considered so shocking. It was in Whitewater, which is in Walworth County, maybe about half an hour's drive from where the Beast of Bray Road was. But it was the story of this woman named Myrtle Schauda, who at the age of 17 married a 34-year-old school teacher. So he was older than she was.
Mm-hmm.
But they had 4 lovely children. They operated a dairy in Whitewater. The husband was a member of the Board of Trustees of the Methodist Church. She was known for baking food and taking it to the sick. Their children were beautiful. And they took in boarders or roomers into their house, a couple of young men from the college that is in that town and was then just starting. And as it turned out, one of these young men began an affair with Myrtle. And between the 2 of them, they murdered her husband, Edward, with strychnine, which is a horrible death, just an awful, painful way to go.
Yes.
And they would have gotten away with it, except then she also tried to murder her own 4 children with the same substance. And then it just got strange and wacky. And I actually, I researched that story for 6 years, and I had over 500 pages of court documents. I had copies of the original love letters between Myrtle and her boyfriend. I had very elderly eyewitnesses who were around at the time and could remember different parts. It turned out my next door neighbor was best friends with Myrtle's little daughter, and they often played together. There were good things there. So it was pretty fascinating to me. I just couldn't imagine what kind of mother could do that to her children. That was what drove me to write that book. And there's still, here's something interesting. I had an afterword written by a very well-known psychologist to ask whether he thought, if it occurred in this day and age, if Myrtle would be able to plead insanity. And he said he didn't think so, and told me privately that he said, I can't give this as a diagnosis, but I think some people are just evil.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
which is a comment that many scientists would find shocking. It's considered very old school, and um, most times you won't hear anyone describe people that way. But he said, I can't imagine any other possible real reason. And she seemed sane. She planned everything out very well, knew what she was doing,
Mm-hmm.
but yet she could calmly watch her husband have this horrible death, and then the four beautiful children too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no. Father Malachi Martin, years ago, I'm sure you know who that is, on Art Bell. He's used to be a regular guest with him. He talked about there just being pure evil in the world. So, and I think we see it every day still. But I also think that there's people out there who just one way or the other are just wired differently, and like some serial killers like Ted Bundy, say for instance, who could kill and not feel anything, no emotion, no nothing, and that could be the way his mind's wired. There's people who are born, it's very rare, but it's a disease out there where people don't even feel pain. So I think it's just a combination of both. You could be, there is pure evil out there. Like I said, we see it every day. But I think just some of us just genetically may be wired to where they just, something dies, I don't feel anything,
And sometimes mental illness is involved.
Right.
I don't think it was in Muriel's case, but in certain cases, I do think it is. But yeah, so anyway, that was my first book, and it was true crime, and
very interesting. Yeah, I very much into the history of true crime, and I take an interest in serial killers and stuff like that too. Just I don't know, I find a lot of that darker stuff very interesting, just because it's mind-boggling, the evil that's out there, and what a planet we live on, huh, Linda?
Yeah, it is. It's a wide and wonderful world, but it also has its pitfalls fairly frequently.
Oh, yeah. Yes, we do. And you often wonder, what kind of role these creatures play in what's going on the planet. It's over all these years. We can talk about the Mothman too, who came about when supposedly big things were just about to happen. Tragic events, and I think that still happens with other creatures other than the Mothman too. Any kind of stories you can tell us about that? Other than the Mothman itself, I'm sure there are other creatures who show up at right before that tragic event, or something similar.
Well, there was another flying creature incident. I call it the man bat of La Crosse. La Crosse is a town in Wisconsin, on the western border of the state, right on the Mississippi River, where it joins the Black River. So it's kind of a confluence of waters, and I had a report in around 2005, I think it was, something like that, or 2006, where a man and his son were driving home from musical band practice that they were both in at night to their home in the country,
Mm-hmm.
when this thing came flying at their windshield. And they said they thought sure it was going to just smash into the windshield, but at the last second, it just aimed itself upward and launched off into the sky and went over some trees, emitting this shriek that made the father immediately ill. He had to stop, get the truck to stop. The son was driving, and the father had to get out and throw up, and the son had to get out and throw up. The father was sick for 2 weeks, and they said they estimated its wingspan is wider than their truck, which is really huge, and that it had this humanoid-looking creature with sharp fangs and claws in the center. And, it wasn't anything like a little regular bat, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
The term bat squatch was coined by a young man out in Washington State, describing the exact same creature. And they've been seen over Chicago and other places. But you asked about the foreteller of doom sort of angle. And actually, that man-bat sighting was 3 days before a young college man from that town, or going to college in that town, I should say, walked out into the river near downtown and drowned. And it was 3 days before that happened. This is a long string of serial deaths. We don't know if it's murder. People don't know exactly what it is. There hasn't ever been any sign of definite homicide or anything like that, but it's been going on since the 1890s. I believe a young doctor was the first one for this to happen to. And most of the ones, they're usually very drunk. They've been drinking downtown, and then somehow they go down to the river, and then they're found dead, usually a few days later. And this is one of the recent ones that it happened to.
Huh, interesting. It almost sounds like similar to a gargoyle.
Yeah, that's a very apt comparison. And it wasn't the only appearance this thing made. I found 2 other witnesses who had seen the same thing around that same time near La Crosse.
And no, nothing big happened around those sightings, huh? Just...
Well, it's hard to say. I never really had exact dates on all the other drownings to go back and look and see if there were any other unusual conditions, but it would be a good one to take a look back at in those terms and just check it out. But yeah, and there may have been no significance to the fact that this one bat squatch incident happened 3 days before this particular drowning, but it's just something I took note of and filed away. And people have done documentaries on that. It's an ongoing, sadly, phenomenon, the series of drownings in that particular river. So, and nobody really knows exactly what is causing it. Some people think there's maybe somebody who talks them into going down the river, who's like a serial drowner or something, but there's no real evidence to support that either.
Wow. Yeah, there's so many amazing things going on in this planet. It's just like, and so many weird things that we just don't, hear about. Like, I never heard of that before. We've got, what was the stories where the feet were coming up ashore in the tennis shoes still? But it was it was just a foot. So yeah, and it's like, what, where did that come from? What caused that? And where's the bodies? It's amazing and weird, and they haven't really given us an explanation to what's causing that, Well,
it's kind of like the Missing 411 books. David Paulides' work. Have you read that?
Yes, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's an astounding thing, and nobody really knows. Mr. Paulides doesn't give you any sort of definite answers either.
Right.
I do notice that his first 2 books were about Bigfoot, and they're very good books. I recommend them. I thought they're very, very interesting.
Right. Yeah.
But it's sort of uncanny the way that he's been able to come up with certain characteristics of the people that are taken, and often they're fairly small. They're usually say a woman or a child or a smaller man. They are often at the very end of the group, trailing behind everyone. And it's sort of interesting because my husband and I have just gone through this kind of horrendous summer-long house sale and then, moving and all that kind of thing. We just moved finally a week ago. And in the course of all this, I met a woman, and I'm going through this to let you know that she would want to remain anonymous, I'm sure. So I'm trying not to give anything to give her identity away.
Okay.
But she had an experience this summer that sounds very much like an unfinished episode of Missing 411, because she was walking along a trail in Canada, and she said it was a nice trail. It was, it wasn't bumpy, it wasn't rocky, it was just kind of well kept, and she was walking with her son, who was leading it up, and then they had a 7-year-old and a 3-year-old in the middle, and then she was at the rear of this. And I mean, you can imagine if a 3-year-old is walking along nicely, it's not a real bad or treacherous path, right? It was just, a smooth, nice place to walk through. And the next thing she knew, she woke up, and a month had passed, and she was in a hospital.
Wow.
And didn't remember at all what had happened. But her son remembered walking along, and then after a while turning around and didn't see her at first, and then realized there she was, her head next to a rock and bleeding. She had difficult brain damage from that. And either she fell for no good apparent reason, unexplainably and she was a healthy, outdoorsy type of person. And just there she was. Either the rock hit her in the head and she fell down, or she fell and hit her head on the rock. One way or the other. They had no clue. Nobody saw it. She has absolutely no memory of it. But I thought, wow, what if that was just one of those, I shouldn't say just, what if that was one of those 411 situations that for some reason was not able to be completed?
Wow. Yeah, that's, interesting take, that's for sure. I mean, and like you said, who's to know? I mean, we don't really know the whole story, what could have happened, Unfortunately, she hurt herself, and that's the sad part of it. Hey, how about before, I know we're getting close to the end of the show here, and I'm in Ohio, so I guess I should ask you anything in Ohio that stands out to you. I know we had stuff like the Melon Men. I don't know if you've ever...
yeah.
Of course, you've heard of that.
They're in Michigan, too. The Melon Heads.
Yes.
In Michigan, they're in Saugatuck, and I'm not sure where they are in Ohio, but I've been to Saugatuck and looked for the Melon Heads, and
you haven't found them?
Never saw them, of course, but they're supposed to be hydrocephalic children. It's an actual medical condition where your heads are very large because you have a lot of fluid on the brain. And the story goes that there was at one time this place that, and now, of course, I'm telling a Michigan story instead of an Ohio story.
That's all right.
But they were supposed to all be at this kind of sanatorium for them long ago, and as always happens, the inmates always escaped the institution, and they got out into the woods and assumedly still attack people to this day. Now, I'm sure there's something similar yet different in the Ohio version. But yeah, Ohio is also known for dogmen. And in fact, I was in Defiance. I was very honored to be part of the first Dogman Symposium. We held it in Ohio, Defiance, Ohio, because of the legend of the Defiance werewolf in the early 70s. Yeah, it was a great time. We had very good attendance and was delighted with the beautiful town. But yeah, Ohio actually has a lot of both the upright canid and Bigfoot sightings, both.
Yes.
It's just prime territory for the cryptids.
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm in the Cleveland area, and I'm not too deep in the wooded area, the southern part of Ohio. But
you don't have to. We've had them show up at zoos. In fact, I'm thinking it was the Cleveland Zoo that had a werewolf flap. Not too far in time from that Defiance one.
Really?
I could be wrong, but I'm thinking it was the Cleveland Zoo, yeah. And there are sightings all over. They can be in suburbia, that you don't have to be out in the woods. I had a really compelling upright wolf-like creature sighting in a town called Heartland in Wisconsin. And it's kind of a burb of Milwaukee, and this creature was seen walking between two backyards. It was just the typical neighborhood with the little yards butting up to one another.
Mm-hmm.
It was walking along the back borderlines between these different houses, and also going up to the windows, and it was leaving prints, and standing where you could see it was looking at the child in its bed. And yeah, that's very, very creepy. But when you know they're coming into town, people have seen them rummaging in garbage. I've had reports of a Bigfoot coming into a camp and peeping one by one into each of the little sleeping cabins, where one person who was still awake saw it and just lay there terrified, and wrote me as an adult who had never been able to get over that experience. So they can be just about any place these days.
Okay. Somebody in chat asked, how about Colorado? Any mainstays, creatures there?
I'm thinking there's a lake monster in Colorado.
Really? In Colorado?
And,
okay.
Yeah, I'm thinking, and again, when I don't have the book right in front of me, I don't hold myself to, because 17 books, I sometimes don't remember what I have in one book anymore, when I'm working on another one. But I'm thinking it's Bear Lake in Colorado.
Okay.
There were several right out in those western states, but
maybe Wendy will tell us. Is it Bear Lake, Wendy? So okay. Go ahead, Linda.
So yeah, sorry, I can't remember exactly.
It's
There's
all right.
another one, right? No, the other one is in Utah. So I think it is Bear Lake, yeah. But there are also varied reports of Bigfoot. You can go to there's a big online listing of Bigfoot reports by the BFRO.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And you go and look up, just go to Colorado and it'll show you by counties where they've been reported. That doesn't have all the reports, of course, but it can give you some idea.
Okay. But what's the lake monster? Is it pretty much just like a serpent type thing, or?
Yeah, it's like a large serpent. People don't always have a very great look at it. Usually with the lake monsters, the trouble with them is you normally don't see the whole thing. It's not like they leap out of the water and you get to see the entire body. It's usually like a head sticking up, and then maybe you see the humps as it's swimming along, that kind of thing. But,
yeah, she said I know that lake, so she knows what you're talking about.
Okay, good. So. Then I did get the right. If I come up with the correct lake name, on any given night, I feel like I'm doing well. So
yeah, well,
but these things are all over. Every state has its own and its own type. There are so many.
That's what's so interesting, that it's so varied across the country and even the planet,
I have that story about Bear Lake in the American Monsters book. And that came out just 2 years ago. And I think, if you're interested in the lake and sea monsters, there's a pretty good chapter on that. Or actually a section of chapters.
Okay, and again, go to your website, which is www.lindagodfrey.com,
No
right?
W's, but no W's. It's
No
just
W's.
Nope, it's because it's a blog, so it's just
Okay.
lindagodfrey.com. It's a WordPress blog.
Okay, lindagodfrey.com. And like I said, the links will be in all the descriptions, so I will get it. I'm so used to saying www, so...
I know, it's just automatic when you give any kind of a web address anymore.
Yeah, and usually, you know what, you just put Linda Godfrey, the website's going to pop up there the first thing anyways, usually, but the most popular, so...
Yeah.
But yeah, looks like we got 2 minutes here, so I guess we're at the end of the show here for... I loved it. It was great. I appreciate you coming on and talking to me about all this.
Sure, thanks for having me.
No problem. And like I said, all the links to the descriptions will be up there, and I'll be shooting you over a link maybe tomorrow, Linda. So look for that. And again, I guess I'll let you go, and you take care, and hopefully I'll talk to you in the future sometime again.
Thanks, and thanks to all of your listeners, too.
Okay, thank you, Linda. And I'll let you go, and I'll talk to you, okay?
Okay, take care.
Okay, bye-bye. Okay, there we go. Linda Godfrey. I will have all the links everywhere. I appreciate her coming on here. She was just on, Coast to Coast. She was on Midnight in the Desert with Heather Wade. So she's been doing the tour, that's for sure. She's been getting this book out there for everyone. And it's getting late here, guys. I'm mumbling. You hear me? I'm a little babbling here a little bit. Wendy, thanks for being in the chat. And Verna's gone now, but I do appreciate everybody who listened and continues to listen. I don't know how this is going. An interview popped up. I've had shows lined up kind of into December, so I want to make sure I do these shows still. Like I said, in last week's show, I do believe I probably will continue to do at least one show a week. So, we'll see. And Wendy, I'll be talking to you. But and tomorrow I got Tim Beckley, Mr. UFO. We'll be talking some UFO stuff, so it's going to be pretty darn cool. So, with that said, I am going to be out of here, the end of the show, and I will say peace and love to everyone. Paranormal Into the Night. Check us out. Peace. I'm out.